streaming live.
We are streaming live. Thank you very
It's a new experience.
much. Well, I want to welcome everyone who's watching us on Facebook Live tonight. This is the a continuation of the Facebook Live chats that we've been having with all of our candidates in the 2020 election, and we're thrilled tonight to have with us Mr. Fred Owens, who is running for the 47th State House seat. For those that you know maybe are unfamiliar with Fred's name, Fred ran a very successful write-in campaign in June, and has been kind of running full steam ahead since then to unseat the incumbent in the 47th State House District. And I will just add personally my State House District, so I'm going to be happy to be casting my vote for Fred in November, or actually probably before with mail-in ballots. But
Thank you.
so at this point, again, welcome, Fred, and I'm going to turn it over to you to give us a brief introduction, tell us a little bit about yourself, and introduce yourself to the viewers tonight.
Well, thank you. I'm so happy to have this opportunity to meet, well, almost meet. I can't see you, but I bet there's somebody out there, and I'm pleased to meet you. I was born and raised in Pennsylvania. I'm the proud grandfather of 5 beautiful children. That's grandchildren. I'm a lifelong educator. A couple of years ago, retired after spending 40 years as a professor and researcher at Franklin and Marshall College. Retirement was good. I didn't expect to get involved in politics, but we'll talk more about that in a few moments. What I really enjoy and have since boyhood is the outdoors. Our district and the region I live in, the Pelham Hills, it's just beautiful with the forests and rolling hillsides, fertile farmland, streams. It's wonderful. And I'm worried about the pollution to our air and water. And well, I'm getting ahead of myself here. I'm a member of the Pelham Township Planning Commission. And so that's one of the issues that I can get actively involved in. But this is my first time running for office. I was reluctant to do so. Because, as I said, retirement was comfortable and enjoyable. But, we live in troubled times, and I wanted to do something to help make things better. So, as Chad mentioned, we launched a write-in campaign in mid-March, actually. And with the energetic help of enthusiastic, devoted volunteers, lots of phone banking and texting, but we couldn't meet people live until election day, the primary. So we were really delighted to succeed. We got, I think it was 75% more votes than necessary to win a position on the ballot. So here I am. And I welcome your questions, and let's talk about it.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you for, first of all, thanks for getting into the race. Obviously, seeing that groundswell of support for you in the write-in campaign is a clear indication that there are folks out there who really want to see a change in this district and have kind of the same mindset as you do moving forward. So, and you've kind of talked about it a little bit already, but just give us a kind of an overview of what was it that made you decide to run for this seat? Why right now, this particular time?
Yes, well, again, back in March, the most compelling reason to me was when I considered our times and the troubles ahead, I was concerned about my grandchildren. That it just wasn't fair. That their future is so much darker, and your children as well. You understand that their future is so much darker than mine was when I was growing up back in the 50s and 60s. That's not right. And we ought to be able to restore we have to restore all of the important government services that we've lost over the years. Take education, for example. Did you know that when it comes to the state contribution to local school districts, Pennsylvania ranks 46th in the nation? 46th in the nation. For 20 years, education budgets have been cut repeatedly. I want to work to restore funding for education. And doing that, we can reduce local property taxes while at the same time increasing the quality of the education and improving equity across school districts, whether they're wealthy or low income. All our kids need and have a right to a quality education. It's good not only for them and for the future, but for the future of our communities and our economy and prosperity. You all know that. Well, so I, I was really excited about that sort of thing. And also, as I mentioned already, about problems of uh, air and water quality, environmental protection, infrastructure, from bridges and roads, which is just a matter of maintaining infrastructure that we inherited from prior generations, but also modernizing our infrastructure at minimum to provide high speed, stable broadband internet connection for all the homes in the district. These were important things. Now that was back in March. So the general idea was I wanted to advocate for better government support of basic public interests. And it seemed to me that for the most part, these problems emerged and got worse over time because career politicians had been continually cutting funds from the public interest programs in order to pay for tax breaks and bailouts and subsidies and all manner of advantages to big corporations and the wealthiest 1%. Now, why would they do that? Well, it's called trickle down economics. The theory is that if they, as public servants, well, as servants of the government, if they provide for all the needs and requests of big business, then our economy will prosper more than ever. And thanks to the giant corporations and Wall Street bankers, it will trickle down to the rest of us working folks. Well, it hasn't worked in the past, and it's clearly not working now. That's the big difference between when I was a kid growing up in the 50s and 60s and into the 70s as well, compared to what we have now. So I say enough with the trickle down economics. We need to perk up. We need to invest in our.
Oops. We lost your audio there, Fred. Sorry. There we go. I think.
Do you have me now?
Yep, you're back. So, yep.
Okay. Well, gee, I wonder where I was when I cut out. Well,
You were talking about perking up is
yeah. Oh, okay. So that was it. So it's like the reverse. And the basic idea is how our country was made great by my parents' generation. The greatest generation, and that was a government that invests in the people, invests in the people's growth and prosperity and quality of life, and their success improves the economy and prosperity of their communities, and it perks up right on up through the system. Everybody does better. The rising tide raises all boats and all that sort of thing. Well, okay, so that's where I started. But back in March, we had no idea what we were in for. With the COVID pandemic and the disaster, it's like a double-barreled disaster. The worst health crisis in more than 100 years, the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, and both at once. And it just kept coming on and coming on. And as the problems increased, they revealed deeper lying historical inequities, economic oppression, and systemic racism. And now we see that, we're not going to go back to the old days. The old days didn't make it. We will take those problems from the old days and we will reformulate them in recovery from the COVID pandemic. And that's going to require an enormous effort. Well, that's why I'm running for office. I want to work for all of us in that kind of recovery. And I'll stop there for now. And
awesome. I love the way you kind of divide the pre-March and then post-March side of your campaign, because we all are living that life right now, and I think that's incredibly important to understand that there are still a lot of issues out there that are important, but obviously there are some that have just been pushed to the forefront even more so.
If I may, I just would like to mention one other thing. Uh, at first, I was heartened by the fact that we had bipartisan legislation, the so-called CARES Act, in response to the COVID pandemic back in, I guess that was May. But since then, the politicization of all efforts to moderate and recover from the pandemic have met with hostility. This divisiveness is killing us. The only way that we can cope effectively and recover successfully from this kind of pandemic is by coming together and working in a spirit of cooperation. I just wanted to add that because that's something I didn't really appreciate back in March, but now it's forefront in everything.
Yeah, and that actually is perfect because that leads right into my first question tonight, which is, we know that Governor Wolf and his team have received both praise and criticism for how he's handled the pandemic here in the Commonwealth. As a state representative, what would you do, or what would you have suggested be done differently? And then on the kind of the flip side of that, what do you think that legislators should be doing today to help residents that are most affected by this unprecedented crisis?
Yeah, yeah, big problems. Well, first of all, I want to say we all must recognize that Governor Wolf carries the heaviest responsibilities in the state, and probably heavier than for, who knows, generations. And I think he's done a tremendous job. I think he's consistently pressed for family-friendly policies despite constant resistance from an opposition General Assembly. And for example, in education, he has pressed every year for improving funding for education and using a fair funding formula to uh, uh, eliminate the terrible inequities that exist between wealthy and lower income districts. So I start out with that kind of warm feeling toward his administration. Now, when it comes to the COVID pandemic, of course, he's facing an unprecedented set of challenges with no manual, no guidebook of how to do it. And the challenges are changing daily in a very complex environment. The national situation was chaotic and uncoordinated. And I would say that I felt very confident, and I want to applaud the governor's reliance on a scientific and evidence-based approach to the manifest problems that have risen with the pandemic. Now, this approach, necessarily, because the conditions are constantly changing as the pandemic has grown and receded and grown again, the efforts to moderate it and recover have to change with time. That's really difficult. And it's especially difficult for the population, for us to understand. Last week we were told one thing, next week we're doing something else, right? Mm-hmm. I trust that there is good reason behind that, but frankly, my problem is I'm often puzzled. I don't always understand the reasoning. For example, when the beginning of business shutdowns, I couldn't understand why small family garden shop operations would be closed down, but Home Depot and Walmart could stay open. I mean, that looked to me like favoritism for the giant corporations again, without consideration of working. Anyway, so I'm puzzled by that. I don't know what to do. So if I were in a house, I would press for greater transparency. Understanding, however, that it's extremely difficult in the hostile partisan environment that's all around us these days. When people are ready to fight about face masks, I mean, my goodness, let's get serious. Our problems are so much greater. So but that's one thing I would try my best to help facilitate a more transparent communication to help, you know, to help the general population understand. I mean, we need that in order to have the cooperation from everyone. I mean, that's just part of the program. Another thing is, and I don't understand the backstory on this, but it seems to me that the funding available from Washington with the CARES program is slow to appear. We need to expedite, we need to have faster relief to working families and small businesses, to the people who are suffering from all the ill effects of the pandemic. And we need to be able to give uh, uh, better access to healthcare. We have people working on the front lines facing the greatest risk, and they can't afford health insurance. This is nuts. This isn't right, right? So these are things that I would want to work for. Uh, and I guess to just kind of wrap it up, I admire Governor Wolf's priorities. But when I'm elected, I won't be elected just to serve and approve of his decisions. No, I will be working to facilitate better quality of life for our families and communities. And that may sometimes require pushing back on his decision. That would be part of my job. I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point too. You know, I think part of the problem with a lot of our incumbents right now in office is they toe the party line a little too closely, and forget that they are here to represent their constituents, all constituents. So I'm sure, you know, the voters in your district are going to be happy to hear that that line of thought that you just shared with us. So
I hope so.
yeah, right. So, you know, obviously, specifically since June, but there's been an underlying issue of this for a long time. One of the most volatile issues that we've been dealing with is criminal justice reform. And as I said, since June, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement and others have become exponentially more vocal, and rightfully so. And there are some legislators that have kind of, you know, been very tone deaf to those that are trying to bring this issue to the forefront. And there are others, including Governor Wolf and some legislators, who have worked already to start to implement some, you know, criminal justice reform here in the state. What do you propose, you know, that can continue to build on these reforms that either are already in place, or really kind of what would be your main priority in this area?
Wow. This is another incredibly complex problem. And I think it's another example of the damage done by divisive, uncooperative attitudes to address the problem. I think we have to remind ourselves that we must be grateful and respectful for the millions of police officers who have devoted their careers to public service and protect our communities. You know, we can't forget that. And we can understand why some people are tone deaf or misunderstand arguments that say we should defund the police, which makes it sound like you want to eliminate the police. And this kind of stuff just adds to the heat and the smoke and not clear. So I think, sadly, you're right. In June, I remember it too well, with the murder of George Floyd. And that came as an echo of so many prior cases. And what we came to understand is the whole country came to understand that with the advent of, you know, body cameras and smartphone videos providing direct eyewitness contact to cases of extreme police brutality and even murder, it just shocked us to the ground. And it made us stop again and look at the problem and recognize that we have an extremely complex problem here. And there are no simplistic solutions. So I would just say, I'm an academic. I tend to talk a lot. I'm sorry about that. But that's where I am. We have to understand that these are serious problems that have to be addressed directly and effectively. A lot of people say, oh, it's just a few bad apples. Well, yes, I hope that's true. I think it must be true. But we've also heard what a bad apple can do to a barrel. We can't dismiss it as a few bad apples. What we have to do is take action. And Governor Wolf has begun to take action. I see progress. I see real progress. Just recently, he signed two bipartisan bills. Uh, and the first of them, as I recall, included creation of a statewide database so that every event, every incident of a policeman being involved in harmful or injurious or what do you call it, deadly action will be recorded, and the situation will be. In this way, we will have, once the data are accumulated, a record of who the bad apples were. And that way, other jurisdictions can be alerted not to hire those people. That's a good way to thin out those bad apples. I think it's a great step in the right direction. And it was a bipartisan step. That's so good to see. We need that cooperation. The other bill, I believe, had to do with improving the training for police officers, not only in using deadly force, but also in how to de-escalate situations, to recognize cultural problems and differences, mental health problems, and things like that. I mean, that's part of the enormous difficulties that our police officers face when they encounter a person who may be mentally ill and acting out, and it seems it's highly threatening, and it's highly emotional. They must, anyway. It's very rough. It's very rough. And the third thing that I was very happy to see is Governor Wolf created a Citizens Advisory Commission. That's not the full name, but in any event, it's set up. It's a nonpartisan commission where a group of citizens will be dedicated to reviewing the events moving forward, events of problematic police action, and to the effects of new policies and programs. And when I'm elected and in Harrisburg, that's what I would do in the interest of building on Governor Wolf's reforms and efforts to reform. I would listen very closely to what the Citizens Advisory Commission is doing and look at the data that they're working from. And in that way, I think I'd be better able to contribute in positive ways that I don't yet see and understand from this distance.
Yeah, and I think that's incredibly important. I mean, too often, I think at the political level, our folks get criticized for just not understanding because they may not have lived through some of the situations that others have dealt with. And I think what you just said was absolutely critical, is that you have to be listening to everyone and take that feedback and make changes based on that feedback. So yeah, excellent. I love everything I'm hearing. So
thank you, Chad. But I already knew you're voting for me, so it's good to hear.
Gave that away, didn't I?
You said so.
So just shifting gears a little bit, I know frequently the legislators and the legislative calendar specifically in Harrisburg is considered to be kind of unchallenging, meaning that there's a lot of time spent in session, but a lot more spent out of session. And our legislators often get criticized for what they do outside of the session. What is it, when you're elected, what do you plan to do on those days when you are not in session in Harrisburg?
Well, when I'm elected, I'm going to be a first-term representative. I'm going to have a lot to learn. It's going to be almost full-time just to learn what I need to know to do the job right. So when flexible scheduling allows it, I'm going to be meeting with and listening to constituents. But I'm also going to be spending a lot of time in Harrisburg trying to learn the structures and procedures of the House and how legislation moves and how the committees work. I have to learn what the structures of state regulations are, especially in greater detail when it comes to the issues I find most pressing, like education and environmental protection and restoration of our infrastructure. So I'm going to have plenty to do to fill that time. In fact, I find it a benefit, an important benefit to help me do the job well. And then, I was thinking farther ahead, that time would be useful in the same way because there's always more research to be done to evaluate whatever progress or shortfalls we encounter with new policies like access to health care, equal education for all, and so on and so forth. So, basically, the better I understand how the system works and what's happening, the better I'll be able to make things better. It's all about being better.
Yeah.
Simple.
Like, I appreciate, certainly as one of your future constituents, I appreciate, hearing you say that you'll be available to constituents as well, because I will, honestly say one of the biggest criticisms we've heard of the incumbent in this district is, there are a lot of people that don't even know who he is. They wouldn't recognize him if he passed them on the street. So, it's important to have that outreach, and I'm glad to hear that's part of the overall plan, is to continue that conversation with your constituents. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So we've gotten to the part of the chat here where, we've done this now, as I mentioned earlier, with a number of different candidates, and this is, even though it's probably the easiest part, they find it the most frustrating, because this is our rapid fire section where we throw out a phrase or a statement, and you tell us, whether you're in favor of it or you're opposed to it, or however you feel. They find it difficult because these are issues that every single person wants to delve into and go into a lot of detail, and we're restricting them to a yes or no answer, basically. So we're going to afford you the same opportunity we have to them as well, and that is, as we go through this list, when we get to the end, if there's anything that you want to go back, and I know actually there's a couple things that you've already mentioned in some of the other answers that you've given. But if there's anything you want to go back and talk a little bit more in detail about, I would love to give you that opportunity. So, did you have a question?
Yes. With your indulgence, if I may, I will try to limit myself to the yes/no answers. But rather than doubling back later,
Yep.
Because with full reign to talk on and on as I'm wont to do, rather than spend a whole lot more time doing that, I would like to give the very brief answers, but maybe insert a phrase or a sentence, if I might, that would sort of
That's
point
absolutely.
toward the long conversation.
Yeah, that would not, that again, that does not differ from what most of our other candidates have done. So
Oh, okay.
more
Cool.
than welcome. So all right. So we're going to start off with, the first one I have is the increase to the minimum wage.
Absolutely, absolutely. Long overdue. And $15 is just a small step in the right direction. Everybody who works hard, a full-time job, should have a livable wage. $15 is a step in the right direction, but it's nowhere near far enough.
Yeah. Pay equity for women.
Absolutely. I can't believe that we're still talking about this. It's so long overdue. Keep going.
Yeah. Stronger gun safety legislation.
I think the gun safety legislation should be guided by public opinion, which shows strong support for background checks, limited magazine capacity, limited military weaponry, and things like that. And on the other hand, I'm respectful as a gun owner myself for the Second Amendment rights that sportsmen adhere to. I'll stop.
Yeah, excellent. The death penalty, in favor of or opposed to?
I'm opposed to it. I'm opposed to it.
And I think you touched a little bit on this already, but eliminating the property tax.
Yes. No, I don't think we should eliminate the property tax. I think that the local communities should be contributing to the cost of their children's education. It's worthwhile. But I think the property taxes should be brought down to a reasonable level that would not be a burden to working families or to retirees. And that could be done if we restore state funding. The reason property taxes are so high is they're backfilling what districts have lost from state support. I said more than I wanted to, but you got it. Thank you.
That's perfect. And I know, again, you've talked a little bit about this already, but investing in infrastructure.
Yes. And I emphasize investing, not only repair of the legacy, right, but also modernization, which requires investment.
Yeah, excellent. And again, I think you've touched on this a little bit as well. Investing in green industry and technology and green jobs throughout the state.
Absolutely. We see TV ads worrying about loss of jobs in the fracking industry. No worries. You know, the green related industries are going to just grow and grow and grow. We've seen it in other countries, and it can happen here if we get the lobbyists and fossil fuel folks out of the way. So
Yep.
full speed ahead,
Yep.
plenty of jobs, and a cleaner world.
Yep. And then the last one is ending voter suppression, and then specifically, with that, ending gerrymandering practices in the Commonwealth.
Yes, again, long overdue. It's so frustrating to see how the districts have been gerrymandered. And I think I've been reading about a proposal, I think it was a bipartisan proposal to create a citizens advisory board in order to oversee redistricting in the future. And it'll have limited number of representatives from each party, but it won't be a partisan driven operation. I'm sorry I don't know more about that, but I think it's an important step in the right direction.
Yeah, excellent. So yeah, see, you were able to keep your answers short there. That was
Oh, thanks. You're indulgent.
again, no, like I said, it's a challenge because I know those are very loaded issues, and you could probably talk for hours on each one of them. So I appreciate your brevity with those. So what we reached basically the end of my questions. I want to give you an opportunity to share any of your final thoughts or final remarks, and yep, I'm just checking to see if we had any questions. I don't see any yet right now, but if anyone has any questions on the live chat, they can post those as well. But I'll hand it back to you for your final comments.
Okay, thank you. You know, my friends, this is a transformative moment in history. This is our opportunity to get the government back on track, but we must work together. Divisiveness is killing us. Remember the greatest generation. When they faced the Great Depression and the Second World War, they came together with common purpose and shared sacrifice. They won the war, established lasting global alliances, built the strongest economy in history, and they made America the leader of the free world. They did that by investing in the people. Well, now it's our turn. We can make it better. Together, we can retire the career politicians who work for big corporations and Wall Street. We can elect new representatives who are dedicated to serving the public interest. And we can eliminate trickle-down policies, making the corporations pay their fair share. That's how we can rebuild the American dream. And that's how our grandchildren and our children will see a brighter future. That's why I'm running to be your representative. I thank you for your support.
Great. Thank you so much, Fred. Is there, how can folks reach out to you if they're interested in volunteering or contributing financially to your campaign?
Oh, please just send us an email or a note. We're welcoming volunteers. We have, in fact, a growing number of energetic volunteers, phone banking and texting. And, we really need financial contributions. As a grassroots campaign, all the resources we have come from personal, individual contributions. Many people were very generous in the beginning, and that was important to our success in the primary. But now we're in a bigger race, and we need more resources to keep pushing the whole way to November. So please go to our Facebook page or our website, Fred Owens for PA House, and find an opportunity. You can fill out a form to volunteer. You can donate through ActBlue or with a check. Thank you so much for all your help.
Awesome. Thank you. And we do have a link to all of Fred's information on our website, which is at yorkdems.org. And you'll be able to get a little bit of information about Fred, as well as I said, be able to reach out through his website, Facebook, all the social media options that are out there. So again, Fred, thank you so much for your time tonight. I know it is it's a crazy time. We're really we're hurdling towards this election faster than I think any of us anticipated. I think this weekend is 50 days to the election, so it is right around the corner, and we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us this evening to do this. So again, thank you. Just to put the plug in for the Democratic Party of York County, our website is yorkdems.org. And we'll be doing another one of these live chats next week with Richard Sterner, who is our candidate running in the 33rd state Senate seat. So we look forward to chatting with him. And actually, I think that's our last of our candidate chats. So we appreciate all the candidates that have joined us thus far, including Fred as well. So again, thank you for everyone who's been watching. Thank you for your questions. And Fred, again, thank you. And everybody have a good evening. Thanks.
It was a pleasure to talk with you. Thanks for the opportunity. Good evening.